next, what you need is your hub. I call this my hub, I don't know what you'll call it. But anyway, that's your hub, your knuckle, your locking nut that goes on the end of there, your new dust seal, which I've just had come through on the delivery, so they go over there. This is a brand new ABS ring, so the little teeth on this line up with this hole here when it's in, so that picks up on your ABS. Get rid of that and that, because we don't need that. And obviously a new bearing. So first things first, bearing. Bearing gets pressed in up until that collar, that sleeve you can see there. So it goes hard up against that. It'll push and push and push till it stops, and it won't go any further. Once you've done that, you then lock it in with your lock ring. So this lock ring seats into this little castellation in here, so that holds your entire bearing inside the hub, so there's no forwards and backwards motion. Once you've done that, it is then a case of installing this ring. So that gets pressed into here, and once you've done that, this part of the hub assembly then gets pushed all the way through the center of the bearing, and then that goes on the back of this spline on there, and then the nut to finish it off. So let's get to it. First things first, make sure that there is no grit or debris or anything inside there. It looks a bit gritty, but it's not. I have cleaned it. It's just little bits from the sandblasters. Basically, it just looks like it's got grit in it, but it's just the markings on the inside of the wall. So yeah, obviously you don't want any grit getting into your bearing, hence why it's got seals on it. So yeah, now make sure that's clean. I'm just going to put a little tiny bit of grease inside there, just so that the bearing slides in a bit easier and nothing binds up. Doesn't need a lot, just a thin smear. Next thing you want to do is get your hub assembly sat on something so that it can be nice and flat. As you can see there, it's not. So you can either use some big blocks of metal like so to raise it up off your bed, so that when you put your steering knuckle on there, it sits nice and flush and it's nice and flat. Or if you've got the old bearing that you took out, you can use them as well. Or if you've got the sleeves, like the little sleeve kit I've got down there, you can also use these to sort of support it that way. Once you've got your hub assembly put into position, obviously you then need your bearing, which will sit inside like so, and then that's going to get pressed in until it hits that collar inside, like I said. So I'm going to be using this inserting sleeve. So as you can see, when that is on there, it's ever so slightly smaller than the outside edge of that bearing, because the last thing you want to do is press that bearing in, and for this thing to be ever so slightly bigger than your bearing and get stuck inside your hub assembly there, and you've got to then try and get that back out. So there we have it set. That's one of the collets that I've got down here. That's the bearing. There's another collet, and this is like a spaced washer that slots over this collet, and then that one there is just a little washer because that wants to run down the middle of that hole, so it just blocks that hole off for me. So once that's put on there, we are ready to press. One bearing pressed in. Should be a little bit of squeeze out of the grease in the back there, which there is. Nice. So the next job to do now is to put the C-clip into this here recess. I'll just readjust the camera slightly so you can see it clearer. There we go. Where did you put those? So you've got your C-clip pliers. They go into those two notches. I can do it. Getting them started in there's a bit of a pain when you're trying to see through the screen. They're not the best of spanners anyway then. So always make sure you put an hand over the top, because if you squeeze these and they let go, you don't want them pinging off and hitting you in the face. So there you go, that's that in there. And then just to make sure that they're home, just give them a tap. There you go, you saw them springing. So they spring into that recess all around in there and stop this bearing from just coming out on its own accord. So you go, some grease in there. Now you can, with these, literally just put them in and tap them in around with a hammer, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put them back in the press, make sure they're all nice and uniform, and press them in nice and square, just so that I don't damage the edge of this in any way whatsoever. So I can find a right sleeve for the size of this. Same thing again, just make sure you've got a right sleeve that's slightly smaller than the housing so it doesn't get stuck. So there you go, that's that one pressed in. The next job to do is to put in the actual hub part into the bearing. So I've just given that shaft there a quick cleaning up, get rid of all that little bit of spot of rust that was starting to appear on it. Not too fussed about the threads, but that part, because it's going into the bearing, I want to make sure it's nice and clean. Now for the next stage of the assembly, because we're pressing this hub through the bearing, you need to make sure that when you're pressing it through, on the back side there, that you are supporting this inner race of the ball bearing. So I'm going to be using another sleeve which is big enough to hold the race, but as you can see is also bigger than the internals of that bearing, because this part of it is going to be being pressed through beyond the face of this. You'll see what I mean in a minute, but make sure that you're not pressing that basically onto that collar. So that's that little sleeve installed on the bed plate there. The hub that is going to be going into it, as you can see, there's not a lot of anything to push against in there apart from the very base of the hole there. So I've got another one of these sleeves so I can fit it, sit it on the top there, which gives me something nice and flat and uniform to push against. So given the hub just a quick little smear of grease there, and I've also greased, it looks a lot but it's not actually that much, I've also greased the rubber part of the seal so that when it goes over the top part of this collar here, it's got some nice bit of lubricant just to help it slide over. So this is what I was meaning by this sleeve. So when that is on there against that bearing race, it lets the shaft of the hub go through it as opposed to binding up on it, because the last thing you want it to do is to bind up and knacker up these threads here that you can't, so that you can't get your nut on it basically, or that you actually push it into something like this and then you can't get the sleeve off of that. So the next thing to do is the ABS ring, so that drops basically into there and locates on the shoulder of the hub. There's a little bit of float in that which I'm not too keen on. I'm going to check my others and just double check. That panic over there, it turns out I just hadn't pushed it quite far enough through, so I'll put it back in press and give it another little yoink. So now this ring fits on that shaft without any play, and then the next thing is the nut onto there, and then it's just a case then of getting the good old torque wrench on it and keep going so you got it torqued down. So you get your punch, put it on the side there, and just give it a few really good taps, and that'll just stop it from coming undone on its own accord. The last little job to do for this now is to just put some grease in there, make sure everything stays lubricated, and then this nice and freshly painted cap gets tapped into place, and then job done. And there it is, finished. And I'll rebuild another one tomorrow, so hopefully I'll have a few more updates for you. And again, thanks for watching, and if you like the content, give us a like, give us a follow, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later, bye.